So you bought Starbucks. Congratulations. Buying every share at the market value we checked before recording would cost roughly $120 billion, enough to buy 20 billion $6 drinks, one every day for more than 54 million years. Your new company collected more than $37 billion last year, over $100 million a day, more than $4 million an hour, around $1,200 every second. But here is the strange part. Before some customers receive a single drop of coffee, they have already handed Starbucks their money. Roughly $1.8 billion sits inside Starbucks cards and accounts, waiting to become lattes. No interest, just customers lending money to a coffee company because tomorrow's order feels easier that way. Then your accountants show you the problem. Coffee is cheap. Stores, workers, and rent are not, and customers can make coffee at home. So why do they keep paying $6 for something they already own? Because you did not buy the world's biggest coffee company, you bought a machine that turns an ordinary drink into a daily habit. And the dangerous part is that the machine can become so efficient that it destroys the feeling people were paying for. Chapter 1. The customer who stops deciding. Meet Daniel. Every weekday at 7:45, he walks into the same Starbucks. Same location, same drink, same exhausted face pretending the morning was his idea. Daniel owns coffee at home. It costs less. It takes less time. Nobody asks whether he wants cold foam, 3 syrups, an extra shot, and a second mortgage. Yet he returns. Starbucks is competing with Daniel's kitchen, the office machine, the gas station, and the possibility that he drinks water before 8 in the morning. To win, Starbucks turned coffee into a transition. The green logo means morning. The cup gives Daniel something familiar, while the rest of life feels less predictable. Starbucks called this the third place. Not home, not work, but somewhere between them. The strongest customer is not the person who loves Starbucks once. It is the person who no longer asks where to go. Chapter 2. The bank with a milk steamer. Daniel opens the app and loads $25. Starbucks receives the cash now. Daniel receives coffee later. If he forgets about $3.47, Starbucks is not sending a rescue team. Customers have left around $1.8 billion inside gift cards and stored value accounts. Most becomes drinks and food. Some may never be used, allowing Starbucks to recognize part as breakage revenue. Starbucks is not legally a bank, but economically this arrangement is beautiful. Customers provide money before the company provides the product. The app also makes spending feel softer. Daniel does not watch $6 leave his bank account every morning. He watches a prepaid balance become slightly smaller. Then come stars, bonus challenges, reminders, birthday rewards, and offers that expire just soon enough to feel urgent. The app does not merely reward Daniel's habit, it measures it, predicts it, and gives him a reason to repeat it. Chapter 3. How water becomes a $6 product. Your operations team places a cup on the table. Coffee, milk, ice, flavoring, and packaging. Those ingredients do not explain the price because Starbucks sells location, speed, customization, comfort, status, consistency, and hearing your extremely specific order repeated without judgment. A basic coffee is easy to compare. A customized iced drink with 2 syrups, oat milk, cold foam, and an emotional support straw becomes its own product. The more personal the drink feels, the harder it becomes to compare. Daniel is no longer asking whether coffee should cost $6. He is asking whether his drink near his office is worth $6. That is an easier argument for Starbucks to win, but cheap ingredients do not mean easy profit. Stores need workers, equipment, electricity, cleaning, maintenance, delivery, and valuable real estate. One complicated drink can occupy a barista while 20 mobile orders appear. The ingredients may be simple. Consistency at global scale is not. Chapter 4. You own the store until you do not. Starbucks operates many stores itself, controlling workers, music, seating, service, and the moment Daniel discovers his name has been spelled in a way nobody thought possible. Company-operated stores let Starbucks keep more of each sale. They also bring rent, wages, repairs, and morning chaos. Licensed locations in airports, hotels, supermarkets, and universities work differently. The partner handles much of the operation. Starbucks supplies the brand, products, standards, and system. This expands the logo without Starbucks personally running every counter. But nobody drinks a terrible airport latte and blames the licensed operator. They say Starbucks was terrible. You can license the counter, you cannot license away the blame. Chapter 5. When convenience eats the coffee shop, Daniel begins ordering through the app. At first, this looks perfect. Faster orders, more data, more customers. Then the pickup counter fills with drinks. Delivery drivers wait beside office workers. Baristas manage cafe orders, drive-through orders, mobile orders, and a customer asking whether 11 modifications still count as coffee. Daniel used to sit for 20 minutes. Now he walks in, searches through 30 cups, grabs his drink, and leaves without speaking to anyone. The app improved the transaction. It weakened the place. That is Starbucks' central tension. Premium prices, human connection, unlimited customization, industrial speed, and tens of thousands of stores delivering the same feeling. Every extra option adds ingredients, training, mistakes, and time. Every digital order increases convenience while making the cafe feel more like a beverage factory. The machine that strengthened the habit can damage the experience that justified the price. So your executives simplify the menu, improve speed, add workers, and try to make stores feel warmer again. Starbucks built a system that taught customers not to think. Now it must stop the system from feeling thoughtless. Chapter 6. The moat must be rebuilt. Every morning, a technology company can update software overnight. Starbucks has to update human behavior across more than 40,000 stores. Every morning, workers must turn the same beans, machines, and recipes into something personal. One barista remembers Daniel's order. Another searches for the lid that vanished from the global supply chain. Competitors can buy beans and copy drinks. What they cannot instantly copy is the combination of locations, routine, rewards, customization, recognition, and millions of tiny experiences that make returning feel easier than reconsidering. But that moat is not built once. It must be rebuilt every morning before Daniel arrives. Who gets rich first? Farmers earn for beans? Suppliers earn from milk, food, cups, equipment, and logistics. Landlords earn from locations. Workers turn the menu into something customers can carry. Licensed partners earn from stores Starbucks does not operate. Then Starbucks earns from company stores, licensed relationships, packaged products, prepaid balances, and a brand strong enough to charge premium prices for an ordinary daily need. But the most valuable asset is not inside the cup. It is Daniel returning tomorrow without seriously considering another option. The Rich Ray owner. Score money 8 out of 10. A global premium brand with customers willing to pay before they order. Control 8 out of 10. Company stores provide control while licensed locations extend reach. Sleep 5 out of 10. Tens of thousands of stores demanding customers and a morning rush every day. Legacy 10 out of 10. Starbucks changed how millions think about coffee and cafes. Final score 7.8 out of 10. The final reveal. You thought you bought coffee. You bought habit. The coffee creates the excuse. The store creates the place. Customization creates ownership. The app creates repetition. Gift cards collect cash before the drink exists. The brand turns an ordinary beverage into a daily event. But the person who transformed Starbucks did not invent coffee, and he was not one of the original founders. Howard Schultz joined a small Seattle coffee business as an employee. During a trip to Italy, he noticed that cafes were not merely selling espresso. They were selling routine, conversation, and belonging. The original owners did not want to build the company exactly the way he imagined. So Schultz left, raised money, opened his own coffee bars, and later bought Starbucks. He grew up in public housing. He was not handed a coffee empire. He also did not succeed because he possessed some magical gift unavailable to normal people. He paid attention. Millions had seen cafes before him. Millions had consumed coffee. His advantage was noticing what the experience made people feel, then taking that observation seriously enough to build around it. Effort does not guarantee a $100 billion company. Timing, capital, teams, and luck matter. Countless hardworking people build good businesses without becoming global icons. But Starbucks leaves a more useful lesson than be born gifted. You do not always need to invent a new product. Sometimes you notice an ordinary product being experienced in a better way. Sometimes the opportunity is hiding inside a routine everyone else considers too normal to study. So congratulations. You bought Starbucks. Daniel bought another $6 drink. Your app collected the money before he reached the store. And somewhere, another ordinary person is watching an ordinary business and noticing the part everybody else ignores. The next empire may not begin with genius, it may begin with attention. Now tell me honestly, what does Starbucks really sell? Coffee, convenience, status, or a place in your day that became too familiar to replace?